Hello everybody. What a... Oh, it's good that. It's good. Hi, welcome back to the Caleb Alamo channel. Today we're going to be looking at the new D-Smoke album, War and Wonders. So D-Smoke is a 35-year-old rapper from Inglewood, California. He came to fame when he won the first season of the Netflix show Rhythm and Flow back in 2019. I did watch that actually when it first aired on Netflix. I thought it was a kind of interesting show, a bit like The Voice or X Factor or something, but for hip-hop and rap. Generally, there were some R&B artists on it as well, but it was a good show. Anyway, he won that back in 2019, and that's really what blew him up. I believe he was a Spanish teacher or a teacher of some sorts before back in Inglewood. Pretty cool to see him now where he is, because he was nominated for a Grammy last year. Was it last year? He was nominated for a Grammy recently with his last album, and so coming into this one I had quite high expectations given how good his last project was and how much I liked it. So what we're going to do, as normal, we're going to go through each track one by one. I'll give my thoughts real quick and then we'll wrap up at the end. So
sounds like a Planonis.
First track, War and Wonders. So this was the title track obviously for the album. Had a really kind of aggressive opening to the track with a cool flow from D-Smoke, and had these effects over his vocals that kind of made him sound more aggressive and like he was really going in on the track. It was cool. Then there was an interlude with a short spoken word passage that sounded to me like maybe God talking, giving him advice or praising him in some way. There were lots of religious themes throughout the album, to be honest. Then the beat switches and there's this more kind of dramatic and pronounced direction with these strange kind of almost spring sounds being like boing boing going on in the background. It was a bit odd. And then it changes again and we get this passage where D-Smoke basically is trying to like hype himself up to basically face all the tests in life and all the wars that he's going to be facing. Hence the title, really. Then there's like a gunshot and some woman's voice is basically begging him to wake up, and it's a really kind of scattershot, dramatic opening. It does set the scene for the record to explore kind of the wondrous side of D-Smoke's life right now, as well as the personal wars that are his past and the things he's got going on and the difficulties. So it's a decent opening track, but like I said, it was a bit all over the place. So yeah, I'm not sure that I loved it, but it was definitely interesting with some cool flows and cool delivery. We move on to track number 2, Dirty Mercedes. So this was a nice and slow-paced track. It kind of provided a nice counter to the opening track that was so scattershot all over the place. I liked the echoed sample, like the echoed vocal sample that was in the background of the track. It gave the song somewhat of this kind of like spiritual feel. It was interesting. D-Smoke still doing his random inclusions of Spanish, which is fine, good for him. I get that he likes them, but obviously I never really understand what he's saying, so it's always just a bit, oh, okay. Good for you, D-Smoke. I mean, speaking whatever language you want, it's up to you, really. Basically, I just can't understand the Spanish segment, so I can't comment on what he's saying there.
Come again? You know I don't speak Spanish.
Then we move on to track number 3, Shame on You. We have another kind of choral or symphony orchestra-esque kind of track, so the drama of it, the magnitude of it. D-Smoke sounds really good over this track. He sounds like he's talking about how in order to succeed or to kind of move away from your expectations, you might need to break a few rules or break from the mold a little bit. Be strong, be bold, be confident. If you don't want to do those things, then it's basically shame on you and you should be shunned, I guess, is what he might be suggesting. Although he does have this really weird line in the middle of the track that I really don't kind of understand its inclusion. I was reading it on Genius, I still didn't understand what he was trying to say, where he just basically says, "Bitch, you ain't farted." Or somebody farted, because it stinks up in here. Anyway, moving on to track number 4, Road Rage. I mean, I did like this track. It was a darker, more deranged almost sounding track with a beat that was produced by producer Dem Joints, somebody who's worked with the likes of Anderson .Paak, Dr. Dre, Kanye, etc., people like that. I even liked hearing D-Smoke do this whole kind of weird, eccentric thing with his voice, and it definitely was a switch from the first couple of tracks. However, it was a rip-off of Danny Brown. It sounded exactly like he was trying to emulate a Danny Brown song. Now, if I thought this was an impersonation of Danny Brown, I might believe it, to be honest. It sounded exactly like that, and I get that D Smoke wants to bring the kind of diverse, different sounds to his project rather than the same thing. The rip-off of Danny Brown was a little too on the nose, a little too obvious. Come on, D Smoke, you can do better than that, but equally, it wasn't done bad. Like, the track's not a bad track, and I would listen to it again. It sounds really good. I really like Danny Brown. I'm a big fan of Danny Brown. But yeah, I don't know, maybe D Smoke hasn't quite found his niche yet, where he wants to take some of these songs. Anyway, moving on to the next track, Mind My Business. The track takes a more kind of West Coast direction, or traditional West Coast direction, sonically anyway, and it has some pretty and soulful kind of soft electric guitar chords going on in the production. I really enjoyed that. D Smoke also sings pretty well on this track. He has quite a nice R&B-esque sounding voice. I thought it was good. It worked really well. I like the sentiment of basically him suggesting that you should just ignore people that try to push you off your pedestal, and even further than that, kind of wading through the pits of vipers almost, that people are trying to bite at you and get at you, and just trying to stay above the water and stay out of reach of these people. Yeah, it was an interesting track. And then moving on to track number 6, Find My Way. So this had a really lovely sounding violin opening, actually. I really liked it. And then it makes kind of way for this more soft jazz rap beat. I told myself I wouldn't keep making this comparison, but you can't help but notice on this track how much D Smoke sounds like he's trying to emulate. Maybe it's not, he sounds like he's trying to emulate, but he sounds a little bit like Kendrick Lamar, basically, with his voice, his vocal inflections, his delivery. I don't think necessarily he's purposely trying to rip off Kendrick Lamar, but does sound like him. And then on the track, you also get a nice guest appearance from Toby Nwigwe. I might be mispronouncing that, so sorry if I am. Who provides a verse about figuring out how he wants to present and basically the route that he wants to take in his career, and that's basically the premise of the whole song, which is quite funny because, like I've already mentioned, you can see quite clearly D Smoke's influences on this album, and he's even ripping off some of them. I even feel as if he's going a bit far by ripping off some of these artists, but you know, he's finding his way. He is finding his way, and I get that, so good for him. And then BJ the Chicago Kid is also on that track, which is a nice little inclusion as well. His vocals are cool. Moving on to track number 7, Crossover. So this featured Westside Boogie, who I don't know that much about, to be honest. I don't know if I've listened to a full project. I might have, I just can't remember. But his verse on the track, I thought it was really nice. It was really soulful. It flowed really nicely. Oh, I'm sneezing. Oh. Basically, on this track, I could see the Anderson .Paak influence. I don't want to keep pointing out the obvious influences, but it's hard not to on this album, really. I could see the Anderson .Paak influence, even from D Smoke's kind of delivery. I don't know if he decided fully what avenue, D Smoke that is, decided fully what avenue he wanted to go down when he made this album, but there are lots of different sounds in the first 7 tracks, or lots of clear influences anyway. Moving on to track number 8, Common Sense. I was quite excited going into this track because it features Sir, the TDE signee. I think the song seems to be about correcting that need to basically please everyone, because it can feel like you're not able to just think for yourself and be yourself because you're so busy trying to live for everybody else's approval and trying to garner their approval rather than focusing on yourself, I guess. I liked the smooth jazz trumpet inclusion in the production. I thought that sounded good. I liked the way towards the end of the track that there were 2 different, or at least 2 different trumpet lines that were laid over each other and were going back and forth. It sounded really cool. It was really nice to listen to. Moving on to track number 9, Why Run. This was a really good track where D Smoke basically details the loss of somebody he knew as he was growing up. That sense of desperation and loss really is something that's quite overwhelming on this track. He cycles through emotions of sadness and anger at the world and at society, I guess, of putting him through all of these kind of inescapable trials. He portrays the inevitability of life as an immovable object almost, and seems to be feeling like there's very little hope for life. There's very little hope for the people that live in bad financial situations like he did and end up living almost like a street life that he does talk about and he does touch on. Moving on to track number 10, Stay True. I wasn't expecting a John Legend feature on the album. Not mad at it. It sounded quite nice, actually. The track brings up another thoughtful moment on the album as D Smoke delivers a verse about going to war with his environment. Basically, he's trying to stay true to his past, but he also desperately wants to escape some of the things that are holding him back in his past and some of the bad aspects of his past. So that's really interesting. Moving on to track number 11, Say Go. So the dramatic kind of trumpets and bass sounds make a return on this track from the very start of the album. Sounds like something that or possibly could have heard straight off a Baby Keem or the latest Baby Keem record, The Melodic Blue. It reminds me of the songs Range Brothers and Family Ties, both which feature Kendrick Lamar, funnily enough. Maybe that's why they remind me of those songs. Maybe that's why Sego reminds me of these songs, because of, again, the Kendrick Lamar influence. Anyway, it does sound like it could have been on the Baby Keem album. We move on to track number 12, Good Thing. I mean, this track was a weird inclusion in the album. I felt like D-Smoke was so concerned with basically just trying to get a Ty Dolla $ign feature on the album. I don't know if he reached out to Ty Dolla $ign, or if Ty Dolla $ign reached out to him, or if they met at some point, but it felt like D-Smoke was basically trying to force a Ty Dolla $ign feature, and that he really, really wanted to get him on the album at the expense of his own sound. And it felt a little bit like he abandoned the direction of the album sonically to incorporate Ty Dolla $ign's typical R&B kind of clubby sound. The club trap drums, the really snappy, overproduced claps, and the hi-hats. It didn't really do anything for me. I didn't really like the song. It was probably my least favourite on the album, and would move on quite quickly from it. I don't think it was a terrible song, don't get me wrong. I'm not having a go at him. I don't think it was a terrible song. I just think that, yeah, it didn't do it for me. I'm glad if some other people enjoy it though. Move on to track number 13, Sleepwalking. This was almost a kind of Afro-Caribbean inspired club track, topped off with the inclusion of the Afrobeat specialist Nigerian vocalist Fireboy DML, who was the feature on the track. The track was called Sleepwalking, and unfortunately it did make me want to sleep. I think that the track, basically this track rounded off this small portion of the album that was pretty weak for me actually. Good Thing and then Sleepwalking, I don't think were particularly great songs, or at least they didn't fit for this album. Moving on to track number 14, Better Half. This is a really smooth track with that very kind of angelic vocal sample sound again. That's something similar to what he used earlier on in the track Dirty Mercedes. He seems to be talking to some partner that he's in love with, and basically just describes, you know, the stereotypical saying of how she's his better half and she's better than him, and she incorporates all the good things about him and makes up all the good sides of him, which, you know, we've heard from many people before. It wasn't anything new, it wasn't terrible, it was done all right. We move on to track number 15, Clockwork. So this had a nice, beautiful feature actually from Marsha Ambrosius. Again, could be butchering the pronunciation, apologies if I am, Marsha. But he sounded really good. He sounded really good on the album. She handles the chorus on the track, and the track itself handles this idea that D-Smoke might be in a finite relationship. So this person he was talking about before, this relationship might not last forever, but regardless of that, he just wants to experience as much love and enjoy it as much as he can while he can. And there's a clock sound, like a ticking sound that comes up every now and then, and you kind of do get that feeling of time being finite, and you know, it makes you want to enjoy the relationships you've got while you've got them, basically.
You're gonna die.
We're all gonna die.
Then we move on to the final track, 16, track number 16, that is Free Right. I really like this closing track. Basically, D-Smoke talks about the comforts in his life and how he can brush off his anger, or how he can cope, not brush off, but how he can cope with his anger towards basically racists and fascists, but he quickly addresses the effects on society of those issues, and he addresses the effects of society, racism, binary thinking, media representation, basically on the people that he knows and people that come from similar situations and backgrounds to him, financially, socially. The freedom of artistry and the need to make a point is evident in this track, and he really feels like he's saying something. It closes the album well as it wraps up kind of this overarching themes of basically he's got good things in his life, the wonders of his life and the things he's experienced since he's grown in status and in, not popularity, but I guess attention or notoriety, whatever, but he's got loads of wonders and he's battling with that at the same time as there are wars going on in society, and there are racist people out there, and there are prejudicial people, and there are societal problems and political issues, and yeah, he's basically at war with his own conscience almost over that. So overall, I thought it was a good album. I think that maybe I was expecting a little bit more because of how much I liked his previous album, and I think off of my first couple listens, I've listened to this 3 times now, I think that his previous album was a better project than this one, but I don't think this was bad. I think this was a very good album. Overall, I'm going to give it a 7.4 out of 10. Like I said, it's a good score. Did enjoy it. If you agreed with me, please let me know down in the comments below. If you disagreed with me, if I was utterly waffling and making no sense at all, also let me know down in the comments. I'd love to have the conversation with you. Please leave a like on the video and please subscribe if you're new around here. Cheers for watching. I'll tell you what, I need a haircut. Yeah, I gotta get a haircut.